Imagine the sheer, suffocating desperation required to look at your only source of food, your only measure of wealth, and your only means of survival and decide to slaughter it all, based entirely on the word of a teenager. It is April 1856, in the lush, rolling hills of the Eastern Cape in modern-day South Africa. The Xhosa nation is caught in a vice grip of existential dread. For over 50 years, they have been fighting a series of brutal, grinding frontier wars against the relentlessly expanding British Empire. The Xhosa are fiercely proud warriors, but they are being pushed to their absolute breaking point. Their lands are shrinking, their people are exhausted, and a terrifying new European disease, bovine pleuropneumonia or lung sickness, is sweeping through their herds, causing their sacred cattle to drop dead in the fields. The psychological toll of this slow-motion apocalypse is staggering. The Xhosa feel as though their world is fundamentally ending, and it is in this atmosphere of extreme paranoia and collective trauma that a 15-year-old orphaned girl named Nongqawuse walks down to the Xhosa River to scare birds away from her uncle's crops. When she returns, she is entirely changed. She tells her uncle, a highly respected spiritual diviner named Nongqawuse, that she was visited by two strangers at the riverbank. These strangers, she claims, were the spirits of their ancestors, and they delivered a message that will seal the doom of the entire Xhosa nation. The spirits told her that the ancestors are watching. They are angry at the impurity of the living, but they are ready to return from the dead to help the Xhosa sweep the British into the sea. But there is a catch, a massive, horrific catch. To prove their faith and cleanse the land, the spirits demand that the Xhosa must systematically slaughter every single piece of cattle they own, not just the sick ones, all of them. Furthermore, they must burn their crops, destroy their grain silos, and cease all planting. If they do this, Nongqawuse promises, an apocalyptic miracle will occur on a specific day. The sun will rise, turn blood red, and then reverse its course and set in the east. A massive hurricane will sweep the British colonizers into the ocean. The dead ancestors will rise from the earth, bringing with them magnificent new herds of immortal cattle, endless fields of perfect crops, and an era of eternal paradise. Now, in a rational world, a starving nation ignores this as the delusions of a traumatized child. But the Xhosa in 1856 are not living in a rational world. They are living in a nightmare of colonial oppression and disease. Her uncle, Nongqawuse, completely buys into the prophecy. He uses his immense spiritual authority to spread the word, and the apocalyptic virus of hope infects the highest levels of leadership. Paramount Chief Sahili, the king of the Xhosa, travels to the river, claims to hear the spirits himself, and issues a royal decree: the slaughter must begin. What happens next is one of the most chilling examples of mass hysteria ever recorded. A nation of hundreds of thousands of people goes to war against its own survival. Men begin systematically butchering their herds. We are not talking about a few cows. The Xhosa are a cattle-based society. Cattle are their currency, their dowry, their religion, and their lifeblood. And they begin slitting their throats by the tens of thousands. The scale of the carnage is unimaginable. The valleys echo with the bellowing of dying animals. The rivers literally run red with blood and choke with rotting carcasses. The stench of decaying flesh hangs over the Eastern Cape for months. Vultures blot out the sun. By the end of it, historians estimate that over 400,000 healthy cattle are hacked to death. Entire fields of vital grain are set on fire. The fanaticism is absolute. Believers sit in their empty villages, their stomachs rumbling with starvation, sewing massive leather sacks to hold the new magical grain that is supposed to appear, and building gigantic new kraals, fenced enclosures, to hold the phantom cattle of the ancestors. But as the weeks drag on and starvation begins to set in, a terrifying psychological schism splits the nation. A small minority of Xhosa, known as the Amagogotya, or the unbelievers, refuse to kill their animals. They realize this is suicide, but in a cult of mass delusion, the voice of reason is always viewed as treason. The believers violently turn on the unbelievers, blaming them for the delay of the ancestors. Nongqawuse issues new prophecies stating that the dead will not rise until every single unbeliever slaughters their cattle. The pressure is suffocating, tearing families apart, pitting brother against brother in a starving, paranoid frenzy. Finally, the paramount chief sets the ultimate date for the apocalypse, February 18th, 1857. This is the day the world will end and begin anew. On the evening of February the 17th, the Xhosa people lock themselves in their huts. They have eaten nothing for days. They are dizzy with hunger, feverishly anticipating the morning. When dawn finally breaks on February 18th, hundreds of thousands of Xhosa step out of their homes and stare at the horizon. They watch the sun crest the hills, They wait for it to turn blood red. They wait for it to reverse direction. They wait for the earth to shake and the dead to burst from the soil. But the sun just rises. It arcs across the sky, yellow and indifferent. The wind blows through empty, scorched fields. There are no ancestors. There are no new cattle. There is only the deafening, horrific silence of a completely self-inflicted apocalypse. The psychological crash is catastrophic. The realization of what they have done hits the Xhosa nation like a physical blow. They have completely annihilated their own food supply, and winter is coming. What follows is a famine so severe, so merciless, that it shatters the Xhosa civilization. People are reduced to boiling their own leather shields and chewing on tree bark. Families drop dead on the sides of the dirt roads, their bodies skeletal, their mouths stained green from trying to eat grass. Over 40,000 Xhosa people starved to death in a matter of months. Entire villages are wiped off the map, turning into ghost towns filled with unburied skeletons. Another 40,000, broken, emaciated, and desperate, have absolutely no choice but to abandon their ancestral lands and walk to the British colonial settlements to beg for work just to get a bowl of porridge. And the British governor, Sir George Grey, watches this all unfold with cold, imperial calculation. He doesn't send emergency aid. He weaponizes their self-destruction. He uses the famine to force the starving Xhosa into indentured labor, confiscates their newly emptied lands to give to white European settlers, and completely breaks the back of Xhosa military resistance without having to fire a single musket volley. A 15-year-old girl's prophecy accomplished in 10 months what the entire British military couldn't achieve in 50 years of warfare. Nongqawuse herself survived the famine, was captured by the British, and lived the rest of her life in obscurity, dying in 1898, leaving behind a legacy as the unwitting architect of her own people's doom. The Xhosa cattle-killing movement is often left out of Western history books, but it stands as one of the most terrifying warnings in the human historical record. It wasn't stupidity that destroyed the Xhosa, it was extreme agonizing trauma and the desperate human desire for a magical solution to an impossible problem. So, when you look at the modern world, at political cults, at economic bubbles, at massive groups of people willing to destroy their own institutions, relationships, and livelihoods because a charismatic voice on the internet promised them a utopian reward if they just trust the plan, you have to ask yourself, are we really that much smarter than the people of 1856? Or are we all perfectly capable of burning down our own lives so long as the prophecy sounds exactly like what we want to hear?